Imagine you are standing on a wide boulevard in Kabul, Afghanistan. The year is 1967. The air smells of fresh bread, roasted lamb, and jasmine blooming in clay pots on second-floor balconies. A warm breeze rolls down from the Hindu Kush mountains, carrying the scent of pine from forests that still exist, forests that have not yet been shelled or burned or stripped for firewood by refugees. The sky is a sharp, impossible blue, the kind of blue you only find at 5,900 feet above sea level, where the air is thin and the sunlight cuts through everything like a blade. Around you, men in tailored suits walk beside women in knee-length skirts and high heels. A yellow taxi honks its way past a bookshop whose window display features poetry in Dari, novels in French, and a stack of American magazines with their glossy covers catching the light. A university student crosses the street with a stack of textbooks under her arm, her hair loose, her sunglasses pushed up on her forehead. A boy on a bicycle weaves between pedestrians, delivering a brown paper package to a tailor 3 shops down. This is not a dream. This is not fiction. This is not a movie set built to look like something that never was. This is exactly what Kabul looked like on an ordinary Tuesday afternoon before 40 years of war erased it from the face of the earth. Look at the street ahead of you. Chicken Street stretches into the distance, lined with carpet shops, antique dealers, leather goods stores, and music shops blasting Ahmed Zahir from open windows, his voice echoing off stone facades and mixing with the sound of traffic and conversation. The sidewalks are clean, swept every morning by shopkeepers who take pride in the appearance of their storefronts. The trees are full, their canopies forming a green tunnel over the pavement, dappling the sunlight into shifting patterns on the ground below. Vintage European cars cruise alongside painted Afghan buses, decorated in bright geometric patterns, their chrome grills gleaming in the midday sun, their wooden side panels hand-carved with floral designs that turn each vehicle into a rolling piece of folk art. A traffic officer in a crisp khaki uniform directs the flow with white cotton gloves, standing on a small platform beneath a canopy of plane trees whose shadows dance across the pavement like something from a Mediterranean holiday. A woman in a fitted coat and leather handbag pauses at a shop window, examining a display of lapis lazuli jewelry set against black velvet. Beside her, a man in a Western-style blazer lights a cigarette and checks his wristwatch. Kabul in the 1960s looks nothing like the city the world will come to know. It looks like a postcard from southern France or coastal Turkey, transplanted somehow into the heart of Central Asia, surrounded by mountains that glow pink at sunset. Now watch the people more closely. A group of young women walks out of the main gate of Kabul University, laughing, their hair uncovered, their textbooks and notebooks pressed against their chests. They wear knee-length skirts, fitted blouses with short sleeves, and low-heeled shoes that click against the sidewalk. One of them adjusts her sunglasses. Another tucks a loose strand of hair behind her ear. A third lights a cigarette and gestures toward a cafe across the street, a small place with a hand-painted sign in Dari and French with wrought-iron chairs set outside on the pavement and a chalkboard menu leaning against the doorframe. They cross the street together, confident, unhurried, taking their seats at a table shaded by a canvas awning. Across the road, a man in a tweed jacket and polished shoes reads a newspaper at a shoeshine stand, while a boy of 14 works a brush over his brown leather shoes with practiced, rhythmic strokes. Further down the block, a couple strolls arm in arm through Zarnagar Park, pausing at a cart with a striped umbrella to buy. Pistachio ice cream served in small glass bowls. The woman laughs at something the man says. He wipes a spot of ice cream from her chin with his thumb. Children chase pigeons across the paved paths. An old man feeds breadcrumbs to sparrows on a wooden bench. Nobody here is afraid. Nobody is hiding. Nobody is looking over their shoulder. And nobody, not a single person in this park, on this street, in this entire city, can imagine that everything they see, everything they know, everything they love, will be gone within 15 years. This is the Afghanistan that the Cold War is quietly, accidentally, generously funding. Both the Americans and the Soviets are pouring money into this country, not because they care about Afghanistan, but because they are competing for influence in a chess game played across the entire developing world. The Americans paved the highway from Kabul to Kandahar, a smooth ribbon of jet-black asphalt cutting through the desert, built by Morrison Knudsen, the same American engineering firm that helped build the Hoover Dam. The Soviets built the Salang Tunnel, a masterwork of Cold War engineering bored straight through the Hindu Kush at 11,100 feet above sea level, connecting Kabul to the northern provinces for the first time in history without requiring a treacherous mountain pass. Both superpowers fund schools, hospitals, hydroelectric dams, and power plants. They build dormitories at the university. They pave roads in the provinces. They train Afghan doctors, engineers, and pilots. The result is something neither side intended, an accidental golden age. Kabul has running water. It has electricity that works most of the time. It has paved roads, public buses, a functioning postal service, and a growing middle class that reads newspapers, listens to the radio, and sends its children to school. The king, Zahir Shah, rules with a gentle hand, balancing tribal politics with modernization. The 1964 Constitution, one of the most progressive in the Muslim world, guarantees women the right to vote, the right to work, and the right to study at any level. For a brief, extraordinary window of time, Kabul is one of the most open, cosmopolitan, and forward-looking cities between Istanbul and Tokyo. And almost nobody in the West knows it exists. But something is already shifting beneath the surface, invisible to anyone walking down Chicken Street or sitting in Zarnagar Park. In the poorest neighborhoods at the edges of the city, where the paved roads end and the dust begins, young men huddle around shortwave radios, listening to broadcasts from Moscow and Cairo. Communist cells are forming quietly in the military academies, recruiting ambitious young officers who see the monarchy as weak and outdated. In the rural provinces, where the mountains swallow the radio signal and the new highways have not yet reached, Islamic scholars preach against the Western influence flooding the capital, warning that the short skirts and the French novels and the mixed-gender classrooms are an assault on Afghan identity. The countryside, where 80% of the population lives, sees almost none of the prosperity visible on Chicken Street. There are no paved roads in the villages, no running water, no electricity, no university. Two Afghanistans are growing side by side, one modern and urban and intoxicated with progress, one traditional and rural and increasingly angry, and neither one understands the other. The king, comfortable in his palace, does not see the fracture widening beneath his feet. The diplomats at the American and Soviet embassies do not report it. The students drinking coffee at Café Wotton and debating Sartre and Marx have no idea that the fault line running beneath their chairs is about to crack wide open, swallowing everything they know. Step inside Kabul University on any weekday morning in 1968, and you step into a world that would not look out of place in Europe or America. The campus sprawls across manicured grounds at the western edge of the city, its modernist concrete buildings funded by American, German, and French development aid. The Faculty of Medicine, a 3-story block with large windows and clean lines, stands across a courtyard from the Faculty of Law. The Faculty of Engineering rises beside a library stacked floor to ceiling with books in Dari, Pashto, English, French, German, and Russian. Over 8,000 students attend lectures here, and nearly 40% of them are women. The hallways buzz with conversation about poetry, politics, quantum physics, and the latest Bollywood film. A professor of philosophy, a thin man in a brown corduroy jacket, walks to his classroom carrying a French-language edition of Sartre's Being and Nothingness. His students, 18 of them, will debate existentialism for 2 hours, arguing about free will and authenticity with the passion of people who believe ideas can change the world. After class, they will cross the sun-drenched courtyard to eat lamb kebabs and fresh naan at the campus canteen, sitting at long wooden tables under a corrugated tin roof, still arguing, still gesturing, still alive with the electricity of young minds discovering themselves. Now walk into a lecture hall in the Faculty of Science. The rows are filled with young men and women sitting side by side, their notebooks open, their pens moving. The women do not wear headscarves. Some wear lipstick. One takes notes in a leather-bound journal with a fountain pen, while another sketches molecular diagrams in the margins of her textbook. The professor, a man in his 50s with reading glasses perched on his nose, writes chemical equations on a large green chalkboard, the chalk dust floating in a beam of sunlight that cuts through the tall windows. He pauses to ask a question. Hands rise. A young woman in the third row answers confidently, and the professor nods, adding her point. To the board. After class, a group of students gathers around a bulletin board in the main hallway, covered in flyers and notices pinned at odd angles. A poster advertises a showing of an Italian neo-realist film at the Ariana Cinema downtown. Tickets half price for students. Another promotes a poetry competition judged by faculty from the Department of Dari Literature, with a prize of 50 Afghanis and publication in the university magazine. A third announces a volleyball tournament between the faculties, engineering versus medicine, this Saturday at the sports field. This is not a Western country performing modernity for the cameras. This is not an imitation. This is a nation building its own version of the future in its own language, on its own terms. Step outside the university gates and cross Jata Maiwand, the grand boulevard that cuts through the center of Kabul like a spine, running east to west for nearly 2 miles. This avenue is the commercial heart of the city, lined on both sides with 3-story buildings housing fabric shops, tailors, jewelers, photographers with window displays of wedding portraits and family pictures, watchmakers, shoe stores, and electronics shops selling transistor radios imported from Japan and record players from Germany. Women in fitted coats browse dress patterns in shop windows, holding fabric swatches up to the light, while their husbands sit on wooden stools arguing with fabric merchants over the price of imported silk from India. A barber shop with a spinning red and white pole offers haircuts in the latest European styles, the barber working with silver scissors and a leather strop while his client reads a newspaper reflected in a mirror framed with hand-carved wood. 3 doors down, a music store displays vinyl records in the window, their cardboard sleeves showing the face of Ahmad Zahir, the singer they call the Afghan Elvis, whose voice pours from every radio, every wedding hall, every open window in the city. A mile, tailor's apprentice, a teenager in a white shirt, runs across the street carrying a finished suit wrapped in brown paper, dodging a bus and a donkey cart in a single fluid motion. The sidewalk is alive with the rhythm of a city that has no reason to believe it is not moving forward, that tomorrow will not be better than today, that this prosperity, this freedom, this ordinary, beautiful normality will not last forever. Walk further down Jata Maiwand and you reach the Kabul River, running low and clear through the center of the city, its banks lined with stone walls built during the reign of a previous king. Children chase each other across a stone bridge, their laughter echoing off the water below. A man sits on the bank fishing with a handmade bamboo rod, a tin can of bait beside him, his shoes set neatly on the stone ledge. On the far side of the river, the old bazaar sprawls through a labyrinth of narrow alleys roofed with wooden beams and corrugated metal, creating tunnels of shade where merchants sit cross-legged beside their displays. Copper pots hammered by hand, stacked in towers that catch the light. Hand-knotted carpets in deep reds and blues, folded and piled to the ceiling. Lapis lazuli jewelry, the blue stone mined in the mountains of Badakhshan, polished and set in silver by artisans whose families have done this work for generations. Sheepskin coats, heavy and warm, hanging from hooks beside embroidered vests and silk scarves. The smell of cardamom tea mixes with wood smoke and the yeasty warmth of fresh naan-baking in clay tandoor ovens sunk into the ground. An old man with a white beard sits cross-legged on a raised wooden platform, drinking green tea from a porcelain cup with no handle, a transistor radio beside him playing a crackling news broadcast from Radio Afghanistan. He has sat in this same spot for 40 years. His father sat here before him. This is where the ancient and the modern coexist without friction, where a 1,000-year-old trade route intersects with a brand new paved highway, where a camel caravan arrives at the same market as a Japanese delivery truck. Now it is Friday, the day of rest, and the city exhales. Families pack into brightly painted buses, the children pressed against the windows, the mothers carrying baskets of food wrapped in cloth. And they drive west to Pagman, the garden district in the foothills of the mountains, about 20 miles from the city center. Once a royal retreat where kings spent their summers, Pagman has become a public park beloved by every class of Kabul society. Terraced gardens cascade down gentle slopes, filled with roses, tulips, and flowering almond trees. Ornamental fountains send arcs of water into the warm air. At the center stands a triumphal arch modeled after the Arc de Triomphe in Paris, built in the 1920s to celebrate Afghan independence, its stone surface carved with inscriptions in Dari. Children run through the rose gardens, shrieking with laughter, while their mothers spread embroidered blankets on manicured lawns and lay out picnics of rice, kebabs, fresh fruit, and flatbread still warm from the morning's baking. A group of young men plays volleyball on a gravel court near the arch, their shirts tossed over a wooden fence, laughing and shouting in the thin mountain air. Teenagers line up at a wooden kiosk painted bright red to buy bottles of Coca-Cola and Fanta, the glass bottles sweating in the heat. A photographer with a wooden box camera, the kind with a black cloth draped over the back, offers family portraits in front of the arch, posing fathers in their best suits, mothers in their finest dresses, and children standing at attention with serious expressions that dissolve into giggles the moment the shutter clicks. The light in Pagman is golden, softened by the altitude and the mountain air, and it falls across these faces with the warmth of a blessing. Nobody here knows that within 20 years, every inch of these gardens will be seeded with landmines. This arch will be shattered by artillery. These fountains will be dry and cracked, and this laughter, this golden, ordinary, irreplaceable laughter, will be a memory buried under the sound of rockets. Cross back into the city as evening falls and the sky turns from blue to amber to deep violet behind the silhouettes of the mountains. The lights of Kabul flicker on, block by block, a modest but real electrical grid, powering street lamps, neon shop signs, and the glowing marquees of 3 downtown cinemas. The Ariana Cinema, the grandest of them, is showing a Bollywood double feature tonight, and a line of moviegoers stretches down the sidewalk. Young couples standing close together, groups of friends sharing bags of roasted chickpeas and sunflower seeds while they wait. The Park Cinema, a smaller venue 2 blocks east, is playing an American Western dubbed into Dari. The Behzad Cinema screens an Iranian drama that the film students at the university have been debating all week. Inside the Ariana, the seats are upholstered in red velvet, worn but clean, and the projector throws a beam of dusty light across the darkened hall. Across the street from the cinema, a restaurant with red and white checkered tablecloths serves Afghan pilau, the rice golden with saffron and studded with raisins, carrots, and slivers of almond, alongside lamb chops seasoned with cumin and fresh mint, and tall glasses of doogh, a cold salted yogurt drink that cuts through the richness of the food. A waiter in a white jacket and black bow tie carries a brass tray of green tea to a corner table where 4 army officers in pressed uniforms sit beneath a framed photograph of the king. Their conversation is light, Their laughter is easy. The war that will consume this country, that will hollow out this city and scatter its people across the earth like seeds blown from a dead flower, has not yet been imagined, not even in the darkest corners of the most paranoid mind. But the cracks are already spreading, and the golden age is running out of time. In April of 1978, a communist coup shatters the peace of Kabul in a single night. Tanks roll down Jadamaiwand at 4 o'clock in the morning, their treads grinding the pavement that the Americans paved, their headlights cutting through the darkness like searchlights. Soldiers storm the Arg, the presidential palace, in a coordinated assault that lasts less than 12 hours. By dawn, the president and most of his family are gone. The People's Democratic Party of Afghanistan seizes power and immediately begins rewriting every rule the country has known. Land is seized from tribal leaders and redistributed. Religious education is banned in rural schools. Women in the provinces are ordered to attend mandatory literacy classes, a genuinely progressive idea enforced at the barrel of a weapon by soldiers who do not speak the local dialect. The countryside, the 80% of Afghanistan that never shared in Kabul's golden age, revolts with a fury that catches the new government completely off guard. Within months, armed resistance groups form in every province, funded by tribal leaders, religious authorities, and ordinary farmers who see the new government as an alien force imposed from a city that might as well be on another planet. The government in Kabul controls the capital. The rest of the country belongs to the rebellion. The fracture that had been growing silently for a decade has finally split the nation in two. Now watch the dominoes fall, one after another, each one larger than the last. In December of 1979, 80,000 Soviet troops crossed the Afghan border in what Moscow calls a fraternal intervention. They come through the Salang Tunnel that the Soviets themselves built 20 years earlier as a gift of friendship, rolling south in armored columns that stretch for miles through the mountain passes. The diesel exhaust, mixing with the thin mountain air. Kabul wakes to the sound of helicopters circling overhead and the distant rumble of heavy vehicles. Soviet paratroopers land at Kabul International Airport and secure the runways. Tanks surround every government building. The Afghan president, the same man who seized power in the coup just 20 months earlier, is removed by Soviet special forces inside his own palace and replaced by a Moscow-approved successor within 48 hours. The invasion transforms Afghanistan from a Cold War chessboard into a Cold War battlefield, the place where the two superpowers will fight each other through Afghan proxies for the next decade. The Americans respond by funneling billions of dollars in weapons and training through Pakistan to the Mujahideen, turning Afghan farmers and tribesmen into guerrilla fighters armed with automatic rifles and shoulder-launched missiles. The war that follows will grind on for 10 agonizing years, take the lives of over 1 million Afghan civilians, displace 5 million more as refugees, and leave the country so thoroughly shattered that it will not recover for generations. Look at Kabul now through the lens of 1983, just 5 years after the coup, just 4 years into the Soviet occupation. The city is unrecognizable. Soviet military checkpoints block every major intersection, manned by young conscripts in olive drab uniforms who check identity papers and search vehicles with the mechanical indifference of men counting the days until their rotation home. Armored personnel carriers and tanks patrol the streets where yellow taxis and painted buses once flowed freely. Kabul University is half empty. Its brightest professors either fled to Pakistan, arrested by the secret police, or simply disappeared. The women who once walked to campus in skirts and sunglasses now stay home behind drawn curtains, afraid of both the government's secret police and the growing power of religious hardliners. Among the resistance forces in the mountains, the bookshops on Chicken Street are shuttered, their windows dark. The music stores are quiet. The cinemas play only Soviet-approved films to rows of empty red velvet seats. At night, the sound of distant shelling echoes from the mountains that ring the city like the walls of a bowl. And the street lights that once gave Kabul its modest evening glow flicker and go dark as the power grid begins its long, slow collapse. The gardens of Pagman are abandoned, the fountains dry and cracked, the rose bushes trampled flat by military vehicles using the park as a staging area for operations in the surrounding hills. The Soviets finally withdraw in February of 1989, crossing back through the Salang Tunnel in a long, exhausted column, leaving behind a shattered country and a puppet government that everyone knows will not survive. It collapses within 3 years, and what follows is worse than anything the Soviets inflicted. The Mujahideen factions, united only by their hatred of the Soviet occupation, turn on each other the moment the common enemy is gone. They divide Kabul into warring sectors, each controlled by a different warlord, each faction shelling the others from the hills. Between 1992 and 1996, the city that survived the Soviet occupation largely intact is methodically destroyed, block by block, neighborhood by neighborhood. Rockets rain down on residential areas from the surrounding heights. The Kabul Museum, once home to over 100,000 artifacts spanning 5,000 years of Afghan and Central Asian history, is looted by soldiers and then shelled into a roofless shell. Jada Maiwand, the Grand Boulevard, is reduced to a canyon of rubble and twisted metal. The Ariana Cinema takes a direct hit. The stone bridges over the Kabul River are shattered. The river itself fills with debris, sewage, and the wreckage of a city tearing itself apart. An estimated 50,000 civilians perish in these 4 years, caught between factions that claim to be liberating them. Then come the Taliban. In September of 1996, they roll into Kabul in Toyota pickup trucks, mounted with heavy weapons, emerging from the southern provinces like a sandstorm, bringing a brutal, absolute order to a city exhausted by chaos. Music is banned, television is banned, photography of any living being is banned, kite flying is banned. Women are forbidden from working, from studying, from leaving their homes without a male relative escort, from showing their faces in public. The university, the same university where women once debated Sartre and studied molecular biology, closes its doors to every female student and most of its male ones. The women who once crossed Jade Maiwand in skirts and sunglasses now sit behind windows painted over with black paint, teaching their daughters to read in whispered secret lessons that could bring punishment if discovered. The football stadium in the center of the city, where families once gathered on weekends to cheer and eat roasted corn and feel the simple joy of being alive in a city they loved, becomes a venue for public punishment carried out before enforced audiences. The triumphal arch at Pagman, already cracked and scarred by artillery, is left to crumble into the weeds. The city that once dreamed of Paris, that once sent its daughters to medical school and its sons to debate philosophy, now enforces a vision of the distant past at the end of a whip and a cable. Look at what remains when you compare the photographs. In images from the 1960s, Kabul is a city of wide tree-lined boulevards, leafy parks where children play, modern concrete buildings with clean lines, and faces that smile at the camera with the easy confidence of people who believe in their future. In satellite photographs from 2001, the same neighborhoods are flattened grids of rubble and brown dust, punctuated by the skeletal frames of buildings that no longer have roofs or walls or purpose. The contrast is not subtle, it is not gradual, it is violent. It is the visual record of a society unmade in 4 decades. One war layered on top of another, like geological strata, each conflict stripping away something the previous one had somehow left standing. The infrastructure that the Americans and Soviets built during their Cold War competition, the highways, the tunnels, the schools, the hospitals, the power plants, became the same infrastructure that both sides and every faction after them targeted, damaged, and destroyed. The highway to Kandahar is cratered beyond use. The Salang Tunnel is damaged and dangerous. The schools are roofless shells. The hospitals are hollowed-out husks. The electrical grid is gone. The running water is gone. The postal service is gone. The middle class is gone. The future is gone. But the cruelest thing about what happened to Kabul is not what was physically destroyed. It is what was erased from the world's memory. Ask most people today, anywhere on earth, what Afghanistan looked like before the wars, and they cannot answer. The image in their mind is fixed and immovable. Dust, rubble, mountains, men carrying weapons, women hidden behind fabric from head to toe. They cannot picture the university student with French novels under her arm and lipstick on her lips. They cannot imagine the young couple eating pistachio ice cream in Zarnagar Park on a warm spring afternoon. They cannot see the cinema lines on a Thursday night, the volleyball games at Pagman, the picnics on the manicured grass, the women in knee-length skirts walking confidently to class at one of the best universities in Central Asia. That Afghanistan, the real Afghanistan of the 1960s, has been deleted from the global imagination as completely, as totally, as irreversibly as if it had never existed at all. The wars did not just destroy the buildings and the roads and the bridges. They destroyed the very idea that Afghanistan was ever anything other than a war zone. They stole not just the future, but the past. And yet the evidence survives, scattered and fragile, in places most people will never look. In faded color photographs stored in shoeboxes in apartments in Hamburg and Toronto and Sydney. In Super 8 home movies transferred to digital files that play on laptop screens in refugee living rooms. In the memories of Afghans now dispersed across 40 countries, carrying inside them a city that no longer exists. An old woman in Hamburg who left Kabul in 1980 with 2 suitcases and her children's hands in hers still remembers the exact taste of the pistachio ice cream from the cart in Zarnagar Park, the way the glass bowl was always slightly chipped, the way the vendor smiled and called her daughter Little Professor. A retired engineering professor in Virginia, 81 years old now, still keeps his handwritten lecture notes from Kabul University, 1966, in a manila folder in his desk drawer, the ink faded to pale blue, the pages smelling of old paper, and a world that is gone. A carpet dealer in London, who has not set foot in Afghanistan since 1992, keeps a single-color photograph of Chicken Street pinned to the wall behind his shop counter, the trees full and green, the cars gleaming in the sun, the sky that sharp, impossible, heartbreaking blue. These fragments are all that survive of a world that was real, that was alive, that was full of ordinary people, doing ordinary, beautiful, unremarkable things in an extraordinary place. They are the last proof that it happened. The lesson of Kabul is not about politics. It is not about ideology or Cold War strategy or the failures of any single government or army or faction. It is about something simpler and more terrifying than any of that. It is about how fragile the things we take for granted really are. A city with universities and cinemas and parks and cafes and bookshops and traffic officers in white gloves can vanish in a single generation. A society where women study medicine and men debate philosophy and children fly kites in the golden mountain light can be replaced completely and utterly by one where all of those things are forbidden. It took centuries of accumulated culture, trade, education, and human effort to build the Kabul of the 1960s. It took 15 years to destroy it, and in the decades since, the world has mostly forgotten that it ever existed, that these streets were ever clean, that these trees were ever full, that these people were ever free. But they were. These streets were real. These people were real. This life was real. And now you have seen it exactly as it was on an ordinary afternoon in 1967, before everything changed forever. Thank you for traveling back in time with me.